大家好，我是 Jenny， 欢迎来到沉思者 J。今天我要说的这个人，用了一台相机，走遍了整个世界，但他说他最重要的工具不是相机，是等待。他说，摄影师一生的修炼，是为的是那一秒做准备，然后在那一秒按下快门。他叫亨利卡蒂埃布列松 ，Henri Cartier-Bresson， 法国摄影师，现代新闻摄影的奠基者之一。他创造了一个概念，叫做决定性瞬间 ，the Decisive Moment。今天我们来说说这个人的故事，他的眼睛是怎么练成的，还有那个决定性瞬间到底意味着什么。亨利卡蒂埃布列松1908年8月22日出生在法国的尚特卢，他的家庭是富裕的资产阶级，父亲的家族做棉线生意，母亲也来自一个富裕的家庭。他从小就接受良好的教育，但他不是一个让大人省心的学生，他比较喜欢艺术而不是学术。他读了文学，读了绘画，他对塞尚，对超现实主义，对非洲艺术都有强烈的兴趣。20岁出头的时候，他在一个叫做安德烈·洛特的画家工作室学习绘画。洛特教他的不只是技术，而是看东西的方式、构图、比例、光影的关系，这些东西后来都进入了他的摄影眼睛里。1931年，他第一次去了象牙海岸，那趟旅程几乎让他丧命。他得了黑水热，一种在当时死亡率很高的热带疾病。他病了很久，几乎以为自己不行了，但他活下来了。他在恢复期间开始接触摄影，他拿到了一台徕卡相机 Leica， 那是一台非常轻巧的小型相机，当时是很新的技术，因为它轻，因为它快，它让摄影师可以在街上行走的同时捕捉瞬间，不需要架三脚架，不需要让对象摆姿势。他说拿到那台相机的感觉，就像找到了他一直在找的东西。他说那台相机成为的是他眼睛的延伸。他开始在街上拍照，巴黎的街道，西班牙、墨西哥、美国，他到处走，到处拍，但他拍的方式和那个年代大多数摄影师不同。那个年代很多摄影师拍人像的方式，是让对象在镜头前摆好姿势，等摄影师准备好了，说一声不动，然后拍。他完全不是这样，他在街上悄悄地走，他观察，他等待，他等一个时刻，那个时刻里所有的元素都刚好对齐了，人的位置、光线、背景、动作、情绪。那一刻，他按下快门，那就是他说的决定性瞬间。他解释说，生活永远在流动，每一秒都在变化，但在那个流动里，有一个瞬间是所有元素达到最佳平衡的时刻，那个时刻一过，就消失了，永远不会再回来。摄影师的技艺就是能够辨识那个瞬间，并且在它出现的那一秒捕捉到它。他说这需要训练，不只是技术的训练，而是观察的训练，感受的训练，让自己成为能够对那个瞬间有所反应的人。他有一个习惯让很多人印象深刻，就是他几乎从来不剪裁照片。他说，如果一张照片需要剪裁，说明那张照片在按下快门的那一刻就已经失败了。构图必须在取景器里完成，在那个决定性的瞬间里完成。这个坚持说的是一件很有意思的事，就是他在按下快门之前，必须已经在脑袋里看见了那张照片，完整的那张，不是以后可以修剪的那张。1932年，他的照片开始在国际上引起关注。那些照片有一种特别的质感，它们看起来像是现实生活的片段，但同时又像是一幅精心构思的画。你看他1932年在巴黎拍的那张照片，一个男人从一个积水的墙边纵身越过，他在空中的那个瞬间，他的倒影在水面上， 后面的海报和他的身影成了一个镜像的对话。那个时刻只存在了1秒，但他拍到了。这张照片后来成为摄影史上最著名的照片之一，它叫做圣拉扎尔车站后面 Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare。 它的照片有一个共同点，就是它们让你感觉你在场，你不只是在看一张照片，你感觉你就在那个时刻的旁边，感觉如果你转头，就可以看见那个景象。1947年，他和罗伯特·卡帕、大卫·西摩、乔治·罗杰一起创立了玛格南图片社 Magnum Photos。 这是摄影史上一个非常重要的时刻，因为那之前摄影师大多受雇于媒体公司，媒体公司拥有照片的版权和使用决定权。玛格南的成立让摄影师第一次能够拥有自己的作品版权，自己决定作品的使用方式。这不只是商业模式的改变，它改变了摄影师对自己工作的理解。他们不只是提供图像的工人，他们是视觉艺术家。他在20世纪中期的几十年里，走遍了几乎整个世界。他拍了20世纪最重要的一些历史时刻：印度分治之后的动乱，中国共产党胜利后的上海，甘地遇刺后的悲痛，苏联的日常生活，美国的黑人民权运动。但他不只拍历史大事，他更多时候拍的是日常。一个老人坐在长椅上，孩子在街上奔跑，市场里的交易，街角的对话。他说那些才是生命最真实的样子。历史大事是生命的高光，但生命的质地是在那些日常的时刻里。1952年，他出版了一本摄影集，书名就叫《决定性瞬间》，法文书名是 Image à la sauvette， 意思是偷偷拍到的影像。那本书后来成为摄影史上最重要的出版物之一，书里有他这些年积累的大量照片。他在书的序言里说清楚了他对摄影的理解，说清楚了那个决定性瞬间的意思。他说，摄影是把头脑、眼睛和心同时放在同一条视线上。那句话说的是一种非常高的要求，不只是技术的精准，而是整个人的集中，你的思考，你的观察，你的感受。同时在那一个瞬间里，他晚年的时候，有一件让很多人惊讶的事发生了，他放下了相机，回去画画了。他说他觉得摄影他已经说完了他想说的，他还有别的东西想探索。他把大量的晚年时间花在素描和绘画上。有人问他为什么要放弃摄影，他说他没有放弃。他说他带着摄影给他的所有东西继续往前走。一个人不需要永远做同一件事。这个态度让我觉得他说的决定性瞬间，不只是一个摄影的概念，是一种关于生命的态度。你的一生里也有很多决定性瞬间，一个选择，一个相遇，一个你决定换一个方向的时刻。那个瞬间是否真的是决定性的，取决于你有没有做好准备，取决于你有没有把你的头脑、你的眼睛、你的心同时放在那个时刻上。亨利·卡蒂埃布列松在2004年8月3日去世，他95岁。他用一辈子的修炼换来了按那一秒快门的能力，然后他把那些瞬间留给了我们。一辈子的准备，换一秒的按快门，那一秒就是永恒。亨利·卡蒂埃布列松，那个发现了决定性瞬间的人。我们下次见咯。Hello everyone, I'm Jenny. Welcome to Thinker J. Today I want to talk about someone who took a camera and walked through the entire world. But he said his most important tool was not the camera. It was waiting. He said a photographer's lifelong practice is to prepare for that 1 second. And then in that 1 second, press the shutter. His name is Henri Cartier-Bresson, a French photographer, one of the founders of modern photojournalism. He created a concept called the Decisive Moment. Today we are going to talk about his story, how his eye was trained, and what the decisive moment truly means. Henri Cartier-Bresson was born on August 22, 1908 in Chanteloup-en-Brie, France. His family was affluent. His father's family made a fortune in cotton thread. His mother also came from a prosperous background. He received a good education from childhood. But he was not a student who gave adults easy peace of mind. He was drawn more to art than to academics. He studied literature. He studied painting. He had a strong interest in Cézanne, in surrealism, in African art. In his early 20s he studied painting in the studio of a painter named André Lotte. Lotte taught him more than technique. He taught him a way of seeing, composition, proportion, the relationship between light and shadow. All of this would later enter his photographic eye. In 1931 he went to the Ivory Coast for the first time. That journey nearly killed him. He contracted blackwater fever, a tropical illness with a very high mortality rate at the time. He was ill for a long time. He nearly thought he would not survive. But he did survive. During his recovery he began to encounter photography. He acquired a Leica camera. It was an extremely light and compact small camera. New technology at the time. Because it was light. Because it was fast. It allowed a photographer to capture moments while walking through the streets. No tripod required. No need to ask subjects to pose. He said the feeling of getting that camera was like finding something he had been looking for. He said it became an extension of his eye. He began photographing in the streets. The streets of Paris, Spain, Mexico, the United States. He traveled everywhere. He photographed everywhere. But his method was different from most photographers of that era. Many photographers of that time photographed people by asking them to pose in front of the lens, waiting for the photographer to be ready, then saying hold still, then taking the picture. He was nothing like that. He moved quietly through the streets. He observed. He waited. He waited for a moment. When all the elements just happened to align. The position of the person, the light, the background, the movement, the emotion, that moment. He pressed the shutter. That was what he called the decisive moment. He explained that life is always in motion, changing every second. But within that flow, there is one instant when all elements reach their ideal balance. Once that moment passes, it is gone. It will never come again. The photographer's skill is the ability to recognize that moment, and to capture it in the second it appears. He said this requires training. Not only technical training, but training in observation, training in feeling, becoming a person who can respond to that moment. He had a habit that made a strong impression on many people. He almost never cropped his photographs. He said if a photograph requires cropping, it means that photograph had already failed in the moment the shutter was pressed. Composition must be completed in the viewfinder. In that decisive moment. This insistence says something interesting. Before pressing the shutter, he already had to see the completed photograph in his mind. The whole thing. Not something to be trimmed later. In 1932 his photographs began attracting international attention. Those images had a particular quality. They looked like fragments of real life, but simultaneously felt like carefully conceived paintings. Look at his 1932 photograph taken in Paris. A man leaping over a puddle behind a wall. That moment he is in the air. His reflection in the water below him. The poster behind him and his silhouette creating a mirrored conversation. That moment lasted only a second. But he caught it. That photograph later became one of the most famous photographs in the history of photography. It is called Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare. His photographs share something in common. They make you feel present. You are not only looking at a photograph. You feel you are right beside that moment. As if turning your head would let you see that scene. In 1947 he joined Robert Capa, David Seymour, and George Roger to co-found Magnum Photos. This was a very important moment in photography history. Before this, photographers were mostly employed by media companies. The media company owned the copyright and controlled how images were used. The founding of Magnum allowed photographers to own the rights to their own work for the first time. To decide themselves how their work would be used. This was more than a change in business model. It changed how photographers understood their own work. They were not workers who provided images. They were visual artists. Over several decades in the mid-20th century, he traveled through nearly the entire world. He photographed some of the most important historical moments of the 20th century. The upheaval after the partition of India. Shanghai after the Communist Party's victory. The grief following Gandhi's assassination. Everyday life in the Soviet Union. The Black Civil Rights Movement in America. But he did not only photograph major historical events. More often he photographed the everyday. An old man sitting on a bench. Children running in the street. A transaction in a market. A conversation at a corner. He said those were where life's most genuine texture lived. Major historical events are life's highlights. But life's texture exists in those everyday moments. In 1952 he published a collection of photographs. TID, in English, The Decisive Moment. The French title was Images à la sauvette, meaning images snatched on the fly. That book became one of the most important publications in the history of photography. It contained a large body of photographs accumulated over those years. In the preface he explained clearly his understanding of photography and what the decisive moment means. He said photography is placing the mind, the eye, and the heart on the same line of sight at the same time. That statement sets an extraordinarily high standard. Not just technical precision, but the complete concentration of the whole person. Your thinking, your observation, your feeling, all in that single instant. Late in his life something happened that surprised many people. He put down his camera and went back to drawing and painting. He said he felt he had said everything he wanted to say through photography. He had other things he wanted to explore. He spent a great deal of his later years on drawing and painting. Someone asked him why he gave up photography. He said he had not given it up. He said he carried forward everything photography had given him. A person does not need to keep doing the same thing forever. That attitude makes me think that the decisive moment is not only a concept about photography. It is an attitude toward life. Your own life also contains many decisive moments. A choice. An encounter. A moment when you decide to go in a different direction. Whether those moments are truly decisive depends on whether you are prepared, on whether you have placed your mind, your eyes, and your heart on that moment. Henri Cartier-Bresson died on August 3, 2004. He was 95 years old. He spent an entire lifetime preparing to press the shutter for 1 second. And then he left those moments to us. A lifetime of preparation. For 1 second. That second became eternal. Henri Cartier-Bresson. The man who discovered the decisive moment. See you next time.